This is Doug Ellin. You're listening to Missin Curfew.
Welcome back to a fresh episode of Missin Curfew. Up dog, fella.
My man.
Mondays.
Fuck it. Usually we got the heebie-jeebie Mondays, but this is nice. You know, it's feeling fresh.
Thanks to Dougie Gilmore.
Dougie Gilmore is a great interview. I thought he was buttoned up. Remind me of a guy that I wanted to hang around with.
Yeah,
a lot.
I had the old fan.
Especially when he was rocking and rolling Tio.
I was being a fanboy a little bit, but that was great.
I think a lot of great social clips. Thanks to Princey and the boys, Maxie and Binger. Great social clips from it. But
I think I was as nervous as that one as you were for Gretzky.
You were, right?
Yeah. When you told me I couldn't swear with Gretzky, I was like, "Fuck, I'm dog's nervous."
I
don't
was
be
nervous.
swearing. I'm like,
I was
don't
nervous
swear.
Going in there for about a week.
Yeah, no,
Gretz, I was. Yeah, you kind of fucking.
When you get legends like that, it's nerve-wracking.
I know, and he told us that he wasn't going to do it. He was going to Spain on a golf trip, and then I'm like, "Come on, Wayne, I'll come kick your ass if that's the case."
So Dougie was great. Thanks again to Dougie Gilmore. Up dog, something we've talked about. Mr. Curfew is kind of branching away from hockey, right? Trying to get some different guests. We got Doug Allen, creator of Entourage. My favorite show, your favorite show. A show that actually motivated me to make the NHL.
Yeah,
you know, great stuff. Good-looking women living in Hollywood. That's what motivated me.
With your boys.
With you.
In the prime time of your careers.
And then we just happened to meet Kevin Connolly and put the whole pieces together. But in our little way, we had our own little entourage, but we were all making fucking, we were all trying to be Vince.
Making bananas.
Yeah, we were all trying to be Vince.
Sprinter vans. And
Sprinter
going
vans.
to premieres.
It was great, man.
I mean, we're in the movie. You're in the movies.
Man.
And shit. It's like, come on.
I'm just smiling thinking about it right now. The good old days, man.
Dog, nice bow tie. I mean, it was such a time of our lives we look back on and say, holy fuck, that was fun.
We were living the dream.
That was fun.
I miss
Hell of a ride.
I don't miss the workouts and the back skates, but I miss everything else about it.
I miss it all. I miss the hurt.
Yeah.
I miss the pain. And then the rewards.
There's some different kind of pain now. So anyways, the creator of Entourage, Doug Allen, coming at you. Welcome back to Mr. Curfew. Up dog. Great get for us today. I'm a fan of this guy for a long time. Our favorite show while we were playing in the National Hockey League was Entourage.
I can't believe he even allowed you to be on a couple of them.
Yeah, I know. You know what? I did make a couple of them. So Doug Allen, the creator of Entourage. Doug, thanks for taking the time, buddy. We've been big fans of yours for a long time.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. What's going on?
You know what? Updog brings up a great point. I want to know if you remember this. So I was on set with you guys. You were shooting at the Roosevelt. It was probably season 8 where Vince was making the tape to prove to the girl. And do you remember Andy Dick was going mental on the set and you had to straighten him out?
Yeah, we just talked about that on the podcast. I could have beat Andy Dick's ass, but I really needed you to take him out quickly. It was pretty torturous. He was on something or whatever, and he was just really aggressively distracting everybody.
And Doug was trying to be such a good guy about it, right? Doug's like, and one thing I did realize about your business is being on set with you and Collins is like how long it takes for one shot. Right? Like for one shot, it takes fucking all day. So Doug finally, and Collins was like, look at Doug, he's about to snap. Look at Doug, he's about to snap. And finally you're just like, Andy, would you beat it, man? You ruined the shot.
Yeah. I mean, it's like when you have the hockey players on set, you're hoping one of them jumps in,
Yeah.
But fortunately, Andy Dick was probably someone I could physically handle, but it was pretty tough. I think we had a grip like carry him out of there. He would not leave, It was pretty awful. So
yeah, that was my. I actually got cut, Doug, out of great little scene. A great little scene at the
Rose pool, right?
Yeah, me and my boy Lupo, we were with three good-looking girls, and you guys had the cameras right on us. And a couple months later, I'm at Connolly's house, and he's like, "Hey, bro, I got something to tell you, bro. Like, I had to
make it, bro.
I had to cut you out of that scene." I'm like, Tom. I'm like, who makes that decision? He's like,
thanks a lot.
Yeah, he's like, actually, it was me. I'm like, oh, Collins, come on, bro.
I mean, and Doug, you just touched on all these, like the personalities that you've dealt with over the course of your career with Entourage, like dealing with them showing up and whether like some guy, he's drunk or he's all these different personalities. You must we playing hockey. Some days we're like, uh-oh, here he comes again. Like the one guy shows up on your team and you're like, this isn't going to be good. Like he's still drunk. Like, was there cases over the, 10 years you guys were running that show where, all these different people come in and you're like, God, do I got to put up with this guy again? Like, you
know what? There's definitely a couple of situations, but for the most part, we were lucky. And Andy Dick was not invited to the show. But, we were lucky enough to have great groups of people, and we didn't have too many problems like that. You know, we're gonna have Gronkowski on our podcast last week, and you know, he can tell you he showed up and we put him in the movie, and he hung out all day. Like, he could have left hours earlier, and it was usually a good time, and there was no reason to kind of be miserable when you were there. We were usually surrounded by good-looking people. I don't just say good-looking women, but you know, we're usually surrounded and usually had good food and a lot of fun. So we didn't have too many problems, but there's always a couple of jerk-offs that you always have to deal with over the years, you know? For
sure, Doug. And my other appearance in Entourage was in the movie, and it was the scene with Ronda Rousey where you guys were at the old gym in Hollywood, and like, such a long day. Do you remember her by the end of the day where you're like, hey, Ronda, kind of stay with a little bit? But it was like 8 hours to shoot. Basically 45 seconds, man.
Yeah. And she's being physical, and she hasn't done it before, you know? I remember that day like it was yesterday, because Dillon was going, I can take her, bro. I was like, no, you couldn't. No, you couldn't.
That's right. They were standing beside the cage, and Wahlberg was trying to get Dillon going. He's like, hey, you think you can take her, KD? You think you can take her? He's like, 100%.
Get me in there.
It was a great scene. So before we get into more Entourage, let's talk a little pickleball, Doug. I play twice. I play twice a week. The up dog gets out there when he can. He's got 2 young kids, but how good are you, bro? Like, I see first of all, you play at Riviera. Is that your home court?
I mean, I play there a bunch, but I play all over the place, and it would be an insane for me to judge how good or not I am. I'm 54 and a half years old. What I can tell you is I'm better than most 54-year-olds on the planet, but I do play with a lot of professional guys. You know, I like to think I do okay. They're obviously better with me, but you know, it's a sport. You know, what's so great about this sport is I can play with these pros, you know, that some of them were top pro tennis players, and now some of the top pro pickleball players in the world. And so I'm pretty good, but the sport is really, you know, and I haven't seen your game yet, Shane, which I'm excited to see, but the sport has improved athletically so much in the last 3 years that it's pretty crazy. So even the guys that I used to play with, who were all D1 athletes that I used to laugh at and go, you guys suck that you can't torture me at this. They can kind of torture me a little bit now. They've gotten much, much better. I've gotten a little older, but I'm pretty good for an old guy.
Yeah, no, I've seen the film. I've seen the footage on your social media. I got to ask you, how's your dink game? Are you committed to the dink game? Like, when you get committed, do you stay with it, or because it's a big part of the game?
I mean, now the game has sped up a lot, where the dink was everything 3 years ago. And again, you know, I actually have one of my pickleball guys texting me right now. I'm trying to play today, but Matt Manass, who's like the coach to everybody, you know, he knows how much this game is sped up now. So what he said to me, though, he goes, I'm in a bad spot because I'm like in the 1% of the best 54-year-olds in the world. And I'm trying to play with the best 30-year-olds in the world, and it puts you in a tough spot. And as you know from this game, you really want to be on the court with 4 people of sort of your level. Otherwise, you know, especially if you have a crappy partner, it can be a very tough day. You know,
it's like golf. And I'll tease Obi's game, Doug. It's at the net. His wingspan is like 12 feet long. So you're not getting much by him, whether it's down the line or in the middle. And he's got a mean backhand. Like it spins, or it's coming at you hard with topspin, but it's a pretty good game. I give him credit. It's a pretty solid game.
Do you have a tennis background or no?
Not really. I mean, I grew up, you know, we had tennis courts at the golf course where I grew up in Canada, and I would go fuck around and play tennis, but I never played a whole lot. I started playing pickleball probably 2 years ago, Doug. And when I first started playing, I was terrible. Like, I couldn't get my serves in. I couldn't. So I've come a long way in 2 years, but I don't know how good I am. We have some pretty good players at Big Canyon, but me and the up dog, we'd like to play against you. And is Connolly any good? Does Connolly play?
No,
he's that guy. He's that guy we're talking about. Where if he jumps in the game, we're like, just put it to Cons.
I mean, you know what? It's the game. What's so funny about the game is because it's a doubles game. It's a very delusional game, and people really don't realize what their level is. And it's in my opinion, it's a very important game to be self-aware in that game. But you can see the things that people, you know, laughed about for years about pickleball, going, this is an old man sport now. But when you start getting in there with the athletes, and the B, with the people who really understand the angles and the strategy of the game, you can really see how stupid people can make you look in very small spaces, you know?
Do you see any Kevin Washington golf balls in the Riviera tennis courts over there on the left side of number one?
You know what? He definitely can hit the ball, but I have not. I've not been hit with a golf ball yet.
The
but Kevin
ball.
Washington can definitely hit it.
So who's your one partner? If you look at who's your one guy that we know? I've seen you play with pros. I want to talk to you about the Palm Spring course you guys were playing on too. But who's your one guy you think would match up to be a fair fight against a couple ex-NHLers? You got one partner in mind?
Well, I mean, it depends. I played with a lot of pro athletes, and we got, as I said, we got Gronkowski next week. I mean, I beat Gronkowski in ping pong. I mean, incredibly badly years ago. So I'm looking forward to playing pickleball with him. But you know, it's very tough to say because I've got to see you guys level. And there are people. Again, I've played with some of the best tennis players in the world. They need a little time, you know, to understand the difference between tennis and this. Singles, very different game. It's very close to tennis. But when you get into doubles, there's a lot of brain power, especially before you get to that professional level athletic ability, which I'll probably never get to. But there's a lot of spacing that's important in that game. I always tell everybody it's like a two-man game. It's like a two-man basketball game. You know, you're really trying to work with your partner to set up things. And so, but the guy I just played with a pro in Danny Werfel's charity tournament, my buddy Wes Burrows. So we had a good time. We made the semis of that tournament against some good pros and pro-am stuff. But I would think you guys would have a tough time against us, but you never know. You know, I'd like to see it. If we got to fight, maybe it would be a different story. You know?
Well, we could definitely fight, but one thing we will do, we'll put together a little video on our socials, and we'll fire it to him with a little challenge. And
I would like to do a little content piece with you for Missin Curfew victory, like a little content friendly match, maybe, Doug.
I would love it. I would love it.
Doug, have you played Padel yet?
I have not, which looks awesome. Now I know, I know it's kind of growing, and it's like kind of this thing that people are trying to. Oh, it's gonna be bigger than pickleball. It looks awesome, but totally different game.
Yeah, it's a totally different game. Totally different game, but it is fun, and it's like you said, how the athleticism's come a long way in pickleball since it started. The same thing for that. You got to kind of be an athlete. You got to be able to kind of move and know the game and be able to swing. It's a different swing, but it's
more like it just looks like chaos, right? You can get the ball behind you. And
it's just at the long rally. So it's like, it gets intense, and it's more like tennis because you're actually hitting a tennis ball that's just it's not as full as a tennis ball by like, you know, an eighth of a CSI or whatever the hell you call that.
Yeah. Doug, another question.
I think that is more like tennis.
Yeah.
What?
About pickleball too. I gave you a pretty good scouting report on my game. You know, you could wear me down though. So my question is, how long do you play for, Doug? We play best of fives, usually 3 out of 5. We play for an hour and 15 minutes. Are you playing like 2 hours? How long are your games up there?
Well, to be honest with you, now that I've gotten to this age, I'm like 2 hours max. I mean, 3-4 years ago, I was playing 4-5 hours. The guys that I play with, they'll play all day, and it's like they don't even sweat. You know, in the charity thing that I did in Georgia, Drew Brees was in it, and I'm trying to think who else was in it. I mean, the announcer was announcing me, and he said, as my partner, as we walked onto our semifinal court, he goes, "You realize the only reason we're going to lose this is your conditioning?" And the announcer, my friend Morgan Evans, the whole time was going, "Doug's going to need a cardiologist after this." But people think it's not a high activity game, which again, just like ping pong, if you want to play old man ping pong, you can play and not break a sweat. But when you see Olympic ping pong players playing, you understand the kind of cardio level it is. So, I'll get 2 hours and I'll burn 2,500 calories, and I'm a pretty thin guy to start with. So I get a workout, but at this age, I'm like 2 hours and that's it. And the truth is, which I think when I started playing pickleball again, when it was a much slower game, people don't think there's injuries in this. And I stopped playing basketball. I ran a basketball game for a decade because of ACLs and Achilles. And now that's happening to people. You know, a friend of mine, one of the best female players in the world, tore her ACL playing at the Nationals last week. So, you know, once you start speeding up a lot, the injuries actually can happen, and everybody gets out there and like, I don't need to stretch. Let me get a beer, you know. But when you start realizing it can be somewhat serious, you know, there can be injuries. So
no, it's funny you say that. Before we start, I always say, boys, remember the only goal here is nobody gets hurt out here, right? Let's all, go in for a cocktail after, and because we don't stretch either, we just get in there, hit a couple, we're like, let's get her going. So, blasting on pickleball, Doug. Before we move into some entourage stuff, the court in Palm Springs, buddy. Talk to me about it. The indoor court with the top players in the world. We have a saying here on Missin Curfew National League. That is a National League setup out there.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good friend of mine who built that court. It is probably the greatest man cave in the world.
Yeah.
I mean, from the pickleball, basketball, golf simulators, pool, it's everything. But a lot of the nationals were there, pickleball nationals, which, it's amazing. 2 years ago, people were laughing at this, and now it's getting real. And it's at the same Indian Wells Tennis Center where, I watched Federer and Nadal play. And it's getting more and more serious as it grows. So that court is incredible. And the players that I've gotten to play on that court with, it's amazing. So it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, that looks like a national.
It is, yeah. Any man cave with a nice little clay court. It looks bad.
All right, Doug.
It's hard surface.
It's hard surface.
It's incredible.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
We got to work on our game. I'm telling you, he's playing a little modest with us over there. I've seen his Instagram clips. He competes hard. And if you're burning 2,500 calories in 2 hours, you're out there moving your feet.
Well, I'm playing with these guys. I mean, it's again, people don't understand it, how much movement in small spaces you can be doing and how much start and stop is in that game. But I want to see your footage. Now, my Instagram, obviously, I only put my best shit up there. I'm not I'm not putting my lowlights up there,
Yeah.
So that's our homework. We're gonna send them.
Yeah.
I get out there and move it around.
I know the last time you played was unbelievable. Best game I've seen you play. So, Doug, Entourage, first of all, I want to be honest with you, buddy. It was a show, and I don't know if this is good or bad or whatever, but it motivated me to make the NHL. Like, I wanted
That's amazing thing to hear.
Yeah, like I wanted to, with my best buddies at the highest level to enjoy with them. So first of all, thank you for that. But just talk about, all the writing and all the stuff. Like, how did it come about? I know it's a Wahlberg story, but from your end, how did it come about?
So Mark's manager and my manager at the time was my friend from college. And one day he just said, I got this idea. It's about Mark and his friends. That was pretty much all there was. So as we started, I remember we were at the Manhattan Wonton Factory on Melrose Place in LA. And I was like, that's the worst idea I've ever heard. I don't want to watch a bunch of losers live off a movie star. And, as my manager had often said to me before, by the way, I had no job. It wasn't like I had something else I was doing. He said, you'll figure it out. And what really hit me about an entourage when it's proper, because a lot of times it isn't. A lot of times entourages are a bunch of hanger-ons and a bunch of losers. And, so to me, it was making about a family, and kind of I used the relationships that I grew up with and my high school friends and elementary school friends, and really made it, as much as people think it was about Hollywood, for me, it was about friendship and loyalty. And that was the real key to the show. And then obviously going, wow, I get to have my best friend take me on this ride through Fantasyland. And that was where we started.
Yeah, and that's true. Like, especially hearing about you guys talk about it on Victory, the podcast, which is a great listen for anyone who's an Entourage fan. It's about friendships. You talk about your buddies from New York and the characters you had. And the one character that I love is Billy Walsh. And I know it's Kevin Connolly's favorite character too, but just talk about writing Billy Walsh and like the season where he's met Ian was, Doug, some of the best work ever, man. That was so entertaining, Billy Walsh.
Thank you. So, that was based, again, my first call when Entourage got picked up, we did the pilot, and then they're like, okay, you got to write more of these. And I was like, fuck, how do I do that? Am I allowed to curse on this, brother?
Yeah.
I'm like, how do I do that? So no, I'm like, okay, let's hire some writers. I'd made 2 independent films. I didn't know anyone in TV. So I called my buddy Rob Weiss, who's, I grew up with, and he made some independent films. And I said, come write this. It's going to be about like how we grew up, sort of. And Rob was Billy Walsh. He had made this big Sundance hit. Came out of the gate. He's getting photographed for Vogue. He's getting deals all over the place when we're like 21 years old, and he never made another movie. And I don't laugh about that, but he was, he knows it. He was fucking crazy.
We can laugh.
And Rob and I wrote some things together, and we went into some meetings together. And I said, Rob, I want to come up with this character that's, loosely based on you, but why don't you play it? And he never acted a day in his life. He's like, I'm not playing it. I'm not doing this, whatever. So anyway, when we got Reese, it just all really came together. And then I started obviously exaggerating stories of all of the crazy filmmakers I knew growing up from, film school and all that stuff. So
I had another question about writing, Doug. Like, there's a lot of pressure on hockey players day in and day out to perform, right? And for me, back in the day, I would fight. So some nights, before the game, I wouldn't sleep very good because I was worried about a fight. Like, throughout the Entourage, was there ever times where you're writing and you're just like, holy fuck, the show starts next week and I only got talk me through the process of writing a season. Did it come to you in a couple weeks or were you scrapping to get the episode in?
I mean, I talk about this a lot on the podcast, but the torture I go through to write scripts, and I don't care what anybody has to think about that. It's a grind, and to come up with more and more stories about 4 grown men who live together is challenging, and it becomes very difficult. So there were episodes that I wrote in 3 days, and there were episodes that took 6 months, and it doesn't mean the 6-month one is any better than the 3 days. So it was always a challenge, and I can imagine the challenges you felt. But when I played hockey growing up on a very, very low level, I could have done it all day and all night. If someone would have paid me to play, I mean, again, I don't want to be punched in the face, and I don't want to be smashed into the boards. But I mean, writing was always a grind for me, where things like hockey and pickleball and basketball were joyous. Now, once it becomes your profession, obviously that could all change. But writing is the toughest part for me. Being on the set, directing my actors and doing things like that was always the fun part. The sitting in a room with a blank piece of paper and trying to come up with things was tough. And, Connolly knows that, because Connolly used to call me, while he was probably out with you guys partying on New Year's, I'd be sitting in the office by myself trying to figure out what the next episode of this thing was. And that's not to say for everybody. There's plenty of writers out there who walk in every day and they do their work like it's a job. For me, it was kind of a 24/7 obsession, and it becomes difficult. It's why I don't write more, because I just don't like it.
Yeah.
So that's why I stopped playing hockey too, Doug. I didn't like it anymore.
Yeah, but your obsession became a lot of people's lives, right? Like lifestyles. Sunday nights, it would be like what we would look forward to. Football, like it would be over, and we're like, now we get Entourage again. Yeah. It was epic.
You know what? That's what makes it all worth it. But I've written other things that I've obsessed about just as much, that are sitting in my drawer, that maybe if it got made, you'd be obsessing over that, but maybe you wouldn't. You never know. And it's, Entourage took 2.5 years for them to finally agree to do it. And it was grind. And that's the way it goes. So obviously to get 15, 18 years later that people still talk about and like it is obviously awesome, and makes it think that those times sitting in the office by myself are worth it,
Doug, you mentioned the grind of writing, and that's totally understandable. Talk about the casting part originally. Did you see the camaraderie there with these young guys right away, and the New York backgrounds that some of them had, and just like how you were like, I know I can work with these kids and turn them into what they need to be for this show?
Good question.
Yeah, I mean, when we got the 5 guys together, which was a big challenge, it took a long time. I mean, Kevin Connolly, he likes to say it's not true, but he wasn't even acting anymore. He was focusing on directing. And I had a bunch of friends. I didn't know Kevin at all. I had a bunch of friends who were friends with Kevin that kept telling me the guy that I wrote, is out there, Kevin Connolly. And we would call his agent and be like, he's not working. He's not doing this. To cast Vince was extremely challenging. I mean, Kevin Dillon walked in and it was game over after one line. Jerry was 15 years, who played Turtle, was 15 years younger than Kevin Dillon. We knew he was the guy, but just the fact that we were pretending they went to high school together was somewhat ridiculous. And Piven was, I wanted him from his work on the Larry Sanders Show. So I offered it to him, and I had to convince him to do it because he didn't know the other guys. But when I got those 5 guys together, I had zero doubt that they were exactly what I was looking for, especially when you talk about the 4 guys, which was, the first thing I said to Mark is I need to make this New York, not Boston. And it's, of course, there's a lot of similarities between working class Boston and working class New York, but I grew up in New York, and I needed to make it kind of more of from my experience and my POV, which Mark was gracious enough to let me do. But I knew when I had those 4 guys together that if they let me roll, that they would have magic, and it was up to me to give them storylines that would work, because instantaneously they just were the guys,
Yeah, and speaking about magic, Doug, you're the character you're talking about, Piven, Ari Gold. I mean, I still watch Entourage, Doug. I watch it after, especially now, Victory. You guys talk about an episode, I go back. But did you see Ari Gold blowing up to what? Like, obviously, Piven killed it, but with your writing in that, like, every time I watch it still this day, I know you're sometimes about the writing, you get a little squeamish nowadays, but What a character.
I don't.
They're legendary lines.
What irritates me about the whole culture at this moment is when you go back and try to revise history of where it was, and I repeat myself about this, but it was the New York Times, the liberal New York Times favorite show. It was Obama's favorite show.
Yeah.
And to look back now and go, who would talk like that in an office, which, maybe at the Missin Curfew offices they might, but, you really can't talk like that in a corporate office today or you would be thrown out. But that was tame and mild compared to what it was back then. But with Piven, I knew before I ever wrote a word with it. And when I convinced him to do the show, I said, Jeremy, and I didn't know Jeremy, I just knew his work. I said, Jeremy, I have no idea if this show's going to work. What I know 1,000,000% is I know how to write for you. And it was his energy. And from the minute I got him on the set, which I think our first day was him and Connolly sitting at this table at Koi in LA. And when we shot that scene, I was like, we have magic. Now you still have to get the network to put it on. And then you have to get the audience to respond to that. But I knew it was going to work. And I knew Jeremy, of course, could you ever say, oh, he's going to win 3 straight Emmys? And no, but I knew how good all of them were, to be honest with you. A lot of people underrate Adrian, but to find a guy who is believable as a movie star, who isn't a movie star, is nearly impossible. And he felt like it from the beginning. And the first season of Entourage, which no one will remember now, but people thought it was a documentary, which while I killed myself over every word, people were like, wait, is this a real guy and his friends? Because they didn't really know who these actors were, probably besides Jeremy, So, but, it was, like I said, from minute one, getting on the set with all of them was just great. And I knew I could write these long speeches for Piven, which, were almost non-existent on television. To have someone go on for a minute and a half was almost, and I used to hand the scripts into HBO. They're like, you got to cut this down. I'm like, just let me just do it. And everything about the show for me was energy and pace. And Jeremy just brings even a turbocharge to that,
Yeah. Well, Doug, we're still using your lines in our group chat. Shout out to our boy Andy McLaughlin, Andy Mack. We say it all the time. Every Entourage crew. My buddy PJ knows them all. I didn't go to the Lakers game because they're playing the fucking Bobcats. We go over and over it. So thank you for that, because we continue to use those amazing Ari Gold lines. But Doug, ramble on. I seen a little bit of what you guys shot. It looked unbelievable to me. Any update you can give us? Are you still working on it? Because what I did see on your Instagram, buddy, it looked amazing.
Yeah, no updates yet. So Ramble On's a pilot that I independently produced, financed, and it's Charlie Sheen, Martin Sheen, Kevin Dillon, Kevin Connolly, a bunch of other great actors. And, right now we're doing something that really nobody does, which is make our own pilot and then try to shop it around. So after the first, it's game on for the next 7-8 weeks. We'll show it to all the streamers. I'll pitch them what the first season is all about. They'll watch the pilot and hopefully they'll give us the $40 or $50 million we need to make the rest of it, And if not, we're thinking about ways that we can release this on our own. But the pilot came out. It's fantastic. And it's about these guys, very realistic look at it's got an Entourage vibe 15 years later, and the way the world is right now, and the look at culture and celebrity and second chances and redemption for a guy like Charlie, who obviously has been through a lot of stuff. So, but it's good. We're really excited about it. And Connolly is amazing in it. He feels much, a lot of people gave E a hard time on Entourage. They thought he was like the pain in the ass, and he's a man in this show, and he looks like a man, and it's a really good role for him, He's
a businessman.
Yeah, you teed me right up to my next question, because I texted Cons when you guys were shooting. I was like, hey, buddy, a little rusty, like a couple years on the bench, huh? Like, how was it? He's like, fuck, Obs, I'm seeing the ball well right now. I pitched a perfect game. So you were impressed with his, because probably not easy just jumping back in it. Yeah.
Yeah, I love him as an actor, reading my words. As a boss, handling my podcasting career is a little more challenging for us to get along. But yeah, no, he crushed it. And people forget he's an Emmy-nominated actor, Golden Globe-nominated actor, and he's really awesome in this. So we'll show it to you.
Yeah,
we'll come by the office. We'll show it to you.
I can't wait. And Doug, now that I have you on here, I want to put you on the spot a little bit. Myself, Uppy, and Loops, we were single guys playing in the NHL, living in California, kind of doing the Entourage thing. Do you think you could have wrote one for us as hockey players, a spin-off of all 3 single guys playing in the NHL, Canadian, going in Hollywood, hanging out with actors. You think you could have spun that for us?
For sure. And you know what? I've wanted to do hockey show forever, you know, which is has always been a challenging thing to get networks behind, even though now, you know, with the streamers, there's more obviously opportunities for it. But yeah, I think, you know, the hockey lifestyle is also a great, wild, crazy, you know, world that I think, you know, and I've gotten to know some guys. I don't know if Connolly ever tell you the Carcillo story when he got in his fight when we were at the game.
Yeah, right in front of him.
Right in front of you guys, right?
Not right in front of us. Danny saw Connolly. That's how they met.
Yeah.
We got invited to the game by Gretzky, and we're sitting in the ice box, which is probably the best seat in sports at the Staples Center where you're on the ice basically. And Carcillo saw Connolly. This is 15 years ago, probably. And Phoenix is actually playing for a playoff spot, but he sees Connolly and he says, through the glass, he's like, "You're taking me out if you know, tonight." And Connolly says, "Get in a fight and I'll take you out." And Carcillo is like, this is going on during a game, an important game. And by the way, Carcillo had a hat trick that night too. Wow. And he says, "Who do you want me to fight?" And Connolly pointed at whoever the enforcer was on the Kings. Carcillo went right out, got in a fight with him. And you know, Connolly says it's not true, but I know what happened. Gretzky looked over to Connolly and goes, "What the fuck did you say to him?" You know, and I think they traded him like pretty soon after that. But he came off the ice after getting in this fight with whoever it was, like, you know, holding his hands up, looking at Connolly. It was right at a slap shot. It was pretty amazing, you know?
Yeah, Cons would always come to my games too, and just see him, he fires you up because you know that you're going out with him after. So he would do my rookie parties for me in LA. Cons has been a good friend of
He's been we call him Captain Cons, Doug, because he's got leadership qualities through and through.
Yeah,
he does. And there's no one better to hang out with if you want to go out. Everyone always calls up and is like, you know, who should I be going out with if I can go out the Entourage guys? Connolly. He will show you the best time for sure.
Yeah, you'll like this, Doug. So it was right in the midst of Entourage, and we played the Kings in the first round. I met Cons there, and we ended up losing the second round. And I went out with Cons in Hollywood, and I ended up staying at his house for 2 nights. I just met the fucking guy. But anyways, I'm at this one party, and we don't have to get into what's going on exactly, but the one girl looks at me, she goes, "Do you think you're in the show right now or something?" Like talking about Entourage. I'm like, yeah, I kind of feel like I am in the show. I'm up in the Hollywood Hills with Kevin Connolly. I'm like, I'm living my own Entourage right now. So
I love it.
It was great. Doug, let's talk about Victory, the podcast. I'm a big fan. I think our listeners, probably most of them, listen to it. How'd you get into it? You're great at it. You seem like you got a passion for it. Are you loving it?
I do love it. You know, Connolly came to me and said, "Let's do a podcast," which it was like 3 years ago. I'm like, "A what?" I really didn't even know what it was. And it was not something I ever thought of, which is crazy. Because when you ask me about writing, like, this is what I wish I was doing 30 years ago. And now we all can do it. And it's so competitive and so crazy now. But I wish I focused on this 30 years ago, because I really do love it. And Victory, Kevin said, "We'll talk about Entourage." And I said, "Listen, I'll do it, but I want to talk about other things also. I don't want to spend my life talking about Entourage." So, you know, obviously we talk about Entourage and behind the scenes and all that, but we also talk about everything going on in our life, sports, you know, whatever it is. So it's been a lot of fun. And you know, a lot of people who listen to it say it feels like the show, because it is just the three of us who have very similar relationships to what the guys on the show had. So it's a lot of fun.
No, I was just going to say, you guys have a locker room feel. Like, that's what me and Uppy go for here at Missin Curfew. Obviously, we lost our third member a couple years ago, Jimmy Scoops Hayes, but we have a locker room feel here, and you guys have that on Victory. When I listen to it, it's like 3 of the boys sitting around, although KD doesn't mind missing the odd podcast, does he?
Well, he's all over the place, and he doesn't like to drive in from Malibu. He thinks it's like he's coming from Seattle or something. But
and then Stock Tip Dave gets to sit in when he wants.
Yeah, Stock Tip Dave takes it on the chin.
I think Stock Tip's he's been locked out of the office as of this morning. I don't know. I got to find out what's going on over there. There's always drama, and that's really what Ramble On is about. Is the realistic behind the scenes of what goes on at Connolly's studio.
Yeah, that's where you lead me, right? So how is it, obviously without Cons, Doug, we wouldn't have got this podcast off the ground. Cons was big for us at Action Park Media. How is it working with him? Because I noticed that you like to give him a hard time a little bit now and then, but you guys are best buddies. You can tell how much you guys care for each other.
Yeah, I mean, he's a brother to me, you know, and, it's wild to watch him. He's obviously starting a business when he's been acting for 40 years, and he's learning as he goes, and he's obviously done some great things. But it's funny, like when I have to think about like him as the boss, it's just not tolerable for me,
I miss the round tables too at his old office when he'd come in the mornings and, he'd fire the Keurig in there. He'd have his little e-cigarette. We're like, okay, what are we talking about today?
His feet up on the table, smoking his little cigarette.
It was great. That's the right feel you need to have at the office.
It is fun though. I mean, it's what happened when I walked into his office the first day when he was asking me to come do a podcast. The first thing I thought is this is a TV show, and to bring in this world, we got Sean Avery's at the office all the time. Who he saw the pilot, by the way. He loves the Ramble On pilot. He thinks it really speaks to him in his life where it's at right now. But every day there's someone interesting walking in there, and there's a story they got to tell. So it's the behind the scenes are as interesting as what's going on the podcast and what's happening on the TV show. So
yeah, it was always fun hanging out at Action Park Media. Me and Cons would get into the whiskey too. We were taking Sprinter vans up there. We couldn't afford to take the Sprinter vans up there. We were getting drunk every Tuesday. We were running out of money. We were running out of money on Sprinter vans. So,
that's so funny.
Doug, I want to talk to you about a guy that I've given a hard time on this podcast, Russell Wilson. I drafted him in my fantasy. I blame him in a couple bad trades I made, but throughout victory, you and Russell Wilson, sometimes you get at it a little bit with him, right? How's your feeling on Russell Wilson right now?
I mean, I don't get at it with him. He used to be a good friend. I put him in the movie, and it's no longer fun to really go after him because everyone's doing it. And
yeah,
I didn't
true.
go after him because to be perfectly honest with you, I thought he was going to have an unbelievable season.
Me
so
too.
I, at the beginning of the podcast, just talked a little bit about my personal experiences with him. And when I texted him to do our podcast and didn't get a response back from someone that I put in the movie when he wasn't really all that valuable to us in the movie. And so it pissed me off, and I'm not shy about that. But I could not be more shocked about this season.
Me too.
And we actually got DK Metcalf. He did respond to me, and he came on our podcast, but I never got Russell, who's, a friend of mine for 15 years. But I would have never believed that this offense was going to be that bad. And I don't know if you want to get into football analysis, but it's at this point, it's the worst trade in sports history. I mean, it makes, and we'll find out because Seattle could get the first or second pick in the draft over this, aside from the other picks that they already have. So, and Denver is in trouble for a long time. And, I don't really see any way out for them. So it kind of sucks,
That altitude will get you.
I mean, you know what, Doug? I saw him at McKenna, which is a discovery project in Maui, and maybe it was for his wife, but he had these two bodyguards around him, and I'm thinking, dude, you're at McKenna. Why do you need bodyguards? I just question him as a teammate, Doug. I don't know. I think that's his biggest problem right now is I don't know if he's a good teammate.
You know what? It's hard to know. Again, like I said, I used to be pretty close with him. And Discovery, I sent him to his first Discovery property, and he bought a house that week and didn't even tell me, which is just bizarre.
Yeah.
But obviously these guys, I don't think Richard Sherman's the most normal guy in the world, but clearly he had problems with him that he wasn't shy about for years. And, it's always that interesting argument, Brady Belichick and, Pete Carroll, Russell Wilson and all of these coaches. Obviously, Brady is proven, he can do it with anybody. Russell hasn't. And Pete Carroll is now, and Geno Smith, it's such an unbelievable story, like to not get a shot for a decade and then he's one of the best quarterbacks in the league this year, So is that Pete Carroll? Is it a system? I'm not smart enough to know the answer to that. But what I can tell you is what I see on the Broncos. I mean, I used to watch him and go, this guy cannot miss.
Yeah.
And he was I think he was the most accurate quarterback in the NCAA before he played for Seattle. So to watch these kind of simple passes now, I have no idea if that's a focus thing, an age thing. That's, it's above my pay grade. But what I can tell you is this is the worst offense I've ever seen. I mean, they're putting up 3, 6, 9 points. I mean,
it's terrible.
Scary,
It cost me money at the start of the year. It's cost me. It's cost
you fantasy.
It's cost me.
Lately,
I had to start making trades, dog. It's been ugly.
You should ask him for some of that back. I mean, he walked away with 200 on this trade.
I know. What's the owner?
Would you give it back, Shane? If you got this contract in the NHL and you just didn't deliver, would you hand some of it back?
No, unfortunately, I wouldn't, Doug. I'd be like, sorry, boys. But Doug, thank you so much for doing this. You're an Islanders fan, right? You grew up an Islanders fan, still an Islanders fan?
I'm a huge Islanders fan. Unfortunately, last year was so disappointing, and I'm kind of a little lost. But yeah, growing up was my life was the Islanders. I lived and breathed them. So
yeah, it was fun back in the '80s, right? I love the old Nassau Coliseum. I loved playing there, mainly because they sucked when I was in the NHL, Doug. But like maybe just touch on going back to that barn back in the day.
You know what? 1980 when Nystrom scores against Philly in Game 6. I'm in the last row of the Coliseum, and it's by far the greatest sports moment of my life, and really one of the best moments of my life. I mean, I was so obsessed with the Islanders. My entire wall was Islander paraphernalia. I can tell you legitimately from probably 79 to 85, I can tell you every Islander player and their number, which I couldn't tell you 4 guys on any of the teams now in any of the sports I watch. I just don't have that kind of connection to the players there. But I grew up and, watching these guys, Gilly and Bossy and Nystrom and Potvin and Chico Resch and Billy Smith and all these guys. And, it was I lived and breathed it every single day. And like when they won, it's amazing. I was only 12. But those 4 or 5 years before felt like a lifetime. And when they broke through and won that cup, I mean, I used to have fights in 6th grade over who was better, Gretzky or Trottier. I mean, it's like legitimate fights. I'm like, are you stupid? And this is before, obviously, 84 when Gretzky just, took it to a whole other level. And now people go, Trottier. But I actually was lucky enough to ask Gretzky how good Brian Trottier was. And he told as good as anybody, and it's sad to me. Before I got on with you, I was just talking about Mike Bossy with someone. The non-hockey fans don't know these guys who were the best athletes in the world. And it's so sad, and obviously you see what's happening. Soccer's kind of growing now. And, we had Thierry Henry on the Entourage movie and nobody knew who he was. And I told him about Twitter and I said, you should get on. And by the end of the day, he had like 1 million followers. Wow. So it's really wild to see the different niches of stuff and to think that some of the greatest hockey players of all time are kind of just forgotten about. It kills me, but that was a very important part of my childhood. So
yeah, well, the Islanders are back, Doug. They're good this year. And I'm looking up the schedule here. March 14th, they're at crypto.com. Maybe we could set it up, me, you, Cons, and Updog. Maybe we take that game in. Maybe we can make that happen.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah,
that would be awesome.
All right, Doug. Hey, man, thank you so much for taking the time, buddy. We're big fans.
Yeah.
Keep doing your thing.
Guys. Be good. I'll talk to you.
Welcome back to Mr. Curfew. First of all, thanks to Doug Ellin. Updog, great job.
I would say great job for great guest.
Good dude.
I feel like he's very inspired guy.
Yeah.
And you could tell he's been a leader. You look at him like a guy that's led, a football team to Super Bowl championships year after year after year. That's what the Entourage was to us, right?
It was.
Award-winning show that we tuned in for 10 Sundays in a row every year for 10 years.
I still watch it.
I know
if
you
I'm
do.
stuck in, I'm like, I'm throwing on Entourage. Let's go here.
And then his relationships with his actors that he got into, and with Cons, specifically Kevin, who's done a lot for us, and especially you, and just Captain Cons is, building his own brand now, and doing the show with Doug. Ramble On coming on.
Yeah.
Looking forward to that. So
we got to get the pickleball date. He confirmed. So we got to get out there.
We'll go to Big Canyon before the holidays here. We'll play some games. We'll have someone videotape and we'll just fire him our shit and see what he thinks. But we'll be posting it with that little challenge.
That's true. Good point. I think we can compete. I don't know if we can win, but I think we can compete.
What he knows over there, he's sitting in his home office there with the Entourage from me.
That's not a sick house or what?
Nice window treatments there. Nice blinds.
He just bought a sick house in the desert too. That he just
so
nice.
He but I know he's he's sitting over there knowing that we would fight.
We're coming.
We're gonna compete.
Hey, the last game you played, you're ready, baby. It was ready, fucking. Yeah. I was like, oh, your serve was lightning, your forehand was lightning. You almost gave him a tip about my forehand. I was like, I'm still telling you about my forehand. He'll figure it out about one shot in when I muff one in the net. But
yeah, that's okay.
We're gonna compete. I did
give him a little tip. I shouldn't have done.
No, it's okay.
Because we're gonna come in.
We're coming hot.
We're coming in there.
I've been playing well lately. So check out Victory the podcast for your Entourage guys out there. Thanks again to Doug Ellin. Up Dog,
Fella.
all that talk about Entourage. Do you want to fucking go to Hollywood right now?
Let's
or what,
have
buddy?
a couple ones.
that was Missin Curfew.